Episode 12 now of the Daily Dozen. We've been doing this now for almost 2 weeks, spotlighting the players to watch in high school for the 2014 season. That's Jason Jewell. I'm Jared Cohen. We normally bring you the recruiting roundup, but right now it's the Daily Dozen. Jason, get us started with episode 12.
A very underrated school, Ironwood Ridge, down in Tucson. I don't know why people overlook this school, but they have one of the top tight ends returning in the state in Matt Salverson. Had 34 catches last year, over 500 yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. Those tight end bodies are hard to find, and Salverson's one of the best in the state.
Staying in Southern Arizona, Derek Summers out at Cienega, the defensive tackle, and this is a big defensive tackle at that. The Bobcats have a very talented group of players on the outside, but this is the player that gets it done in the trenches, and he is someone that Cienega is going to rely upon to kind of be a force in the trenches this season because they look to get back and make a run in the playoffs this year.
Speaking of big, Hamilton quarterback James Sosinski was one of the tallest kids I saw during the spring when I went out to go see them. He's at least 6'6", might be 6'7". Hamilton, over the years, has had a senior quarterback, a one-year starter, and Sosinski is in a battle right now for that starting job at an elite program like Hamilton. We'll see after summer training camp if he ends up being the starter.
Staying at the quarterback position, but also on the defensive side of the ball, is Centennial's Isaac Steele. This is another one of these versatile players that Jason and I have talked about so frequently throughout these Daily Dozen episodes, and Steele is right at the forefront. He will be their quarterback. He played a little bit quarterback in the latter stages of the season last year for the Coyotes, but he played a lot more time at defensive back, and that's where he'll be again this season. He's camped over the summer. It was a very busy summer for him at ASU, U of A, and the University of Miami. Got good praise over there and expects to have a breakout year in 2014.
One of the most prolific offensive attacks in the state is at St. Mary's. The Knights and their quarterback Gabe Losada returned, but one of their best threats in the receiving corps returns as well in Jeremiah Sullivan. Was one of the state's leaders, had 16 touchdown receptions last year, which is absolutely ridiculous, over 700 yards and over 60 catches last year.
It's a new era of football at Mesa High School, as we mentioned, as they had a coaching change this last summer, and they're going to need some leadership. And on the defensive side of the ball, they have that in big Sammy Tuelli. This kid is a monster and a mover on the defensive line. Stands 6'2", 300 pounds, and the Jackrabbits, who have prided themselves on having good players in the trenches in the past, have that in Tuelli, and he'll be a big leader this season.
One of my pet peeves is really not mentioning players that haven't played varsity football yet. And Colby Taylor at Chandler High School hasn't done that yet, but he's a Taylor. You know, that lineage, that his brothers all playing Division I football, his father, the lineage is there, and he is a stud. He already has an offer from Arizona State, going to only be a sophomore, and just another weapon for Chandler High.
For the third consecutive year, the Desert Edge Scorpions will have a new quarterback under center. 2 years ago, Sawyer Long broke out onto the scene, had a monster season for the Scorpions, led them all the way to the state championship game. Last year, Anthony Hernandez was setting state records for what he was doing through the air. This year, Teron Thomas is the latest guy. Now, we don't know what his skill set is. We're going to see our first action of Thomas this year, but if it's anything like the last 2 years, the way that the Scorpions have had great numbers from their quarterbacks, this guy should be poised for a big season.
I don't think there's been a better school at producing offensive linemen than Centennial High School, and Brett Tons has really been known as a defensive lineman, but is going to start at right tackle for the Coyotes this season. But he's also a very good defensive lineman, has committed to Colorado as a defensive tackle. He's 6'3", 270, and I love those linemen that can play on both sides of the ball.
Desert Ridge has a lot of players we've mentioned through these Daily Dozen episodes, and a lot of them are guys that get it done in the trenches. And the most recent one now that we're going to talk about is Tavita Tuafa, coming off a big season for Desert Ridge. This is a guy who's an absolute stud in the trenches. He's big, he's long, and he's strong. Coach Hathcock loves those big fellas down there, and he is going to have a good one this season in Tuafa.
Pinnacle was already a Division I contender, and they got that much better when Adam Turner transferred from Thunderbird to Pinnacle. He was one of the state's leaders last year at T-Bird. He had over 1,200 yards receiving. Brian Lewerke, their quarterback, has a better weapon, a nice weapon to go to in Turner, who already has an offer from the University of Washington.
And finally, Brophy last year, they had their ups and their downs, but they played with a lot of young players. But they surprised everyone when they beat Westview in the first round of the playoffs in an upset win. One of the main reasons why that happened in that with with that upset win was Ryan Velez, who was just completely unstoppable, both at the running back position and as a kick returner for the Broncos. And he's back, and he expects to have a big year to piggyback off that big game against Westview, which is one of the last times we saw him play last year. He will be one of the top running backs and stud athletes in the state. That's it for this edition of the Daily Dozen. Still a couple more to go, so continue to stick with us. High school football season is just around the corner.